This pot has been sitting for a couple hours and it's set up a little bit. You can see it's still really soft, but it's no longer quite as tacky, and it's not like a freshly thrown pot, but it's definitely soft enough that I can bend it without it cracking. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna wipe across the spout on the inside and the outside. This does two things. Adding some moisture back ensures that as I dart and pull this around, I wanna soften that spout back up because that's the spot that usually gets dry. The lip is nice and thick, that's pretty thin. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is take this old ruler, I'm gonna find the center line from my spout to the back. And I simply measure with my knife. Make sure I found the middle. And then I mark it in the back here by rocking that back and forth. All right, the next part is I've got these triangles. And the important thing about this is I've got these two sides that are the same length. And when I'm cutting this, if you cut something and you try to put two sides that aren't the same length together, the tops aren't going to meet up. So I've got these two different sizes. It depends on the size of my pitcher, which one of these I'm going to use. And so I'll kind of get an idea of like how much space is going to be left behind. And the only way to really understand this is to do it a couple times yourself and figure it out. So I've got my middle point back here. I'll lay this on there, and that's going to be where I cut from. So I'll mark this and then move this piece around to this side and try to get into the same area on this side. So now I'm going to cut this, and when I do that, I want to hold the knife at an angle as I come down, and that way I'm going to have these two parts that I can lay back together and they'll be the thickness of the pot. And it also allows them to attach really well to each other. So I'm going to not start quite in the corner where I've made my mark. I'm going to come in a little bit and I'm going to come down to that line. And cutting this back one I find to be a lot easier. So as I cut this front one, that it becomes tricky. Because this way I'm pushing the knife forward, and so naturally it wants to stay at an angle. But this one I've got to pull the knife backward, and I've got to come around with the edge of the blade. I've got to pull this knife around as I go to make sure that I don't straighten out at the bottom of the cut. Do that again over here. Okay, I'll save that. I might need some of that clay in a minute here. Okay, and because this is so soft, I can just lay this down. And I don't even need to stick it together with any slip or anything because the clay is completely wet. And I'll wipe over that crease on the top side. We always want to close up those seams, even if we're going to cover them with clay at some point to get to up in the rim here. And I'm going to look over this and make sure it's pretty centered up. You can see, even though I have this measurement and I'm cutting, you can still see I've got extra on this side of both of these. That's okay. So I'm going to patch that corner really well. I'm going to just make sure that clean that up. Take some of this clay I just cut off. So this inside seam here, this is another seam that I want to make sure I close up nice and good, where these two come together. And I'm going to put a patch over that area. But I still want to make sure it's nice and compressed underneath the patch I put on. And I need this to be a little softer. It's easier if it's a little softer than the clay I'm putting it on. So I'm going to add this ball right onto that corner and work it back and forth and over this edge and soften up this corner here. Fill it in and do the same thing to this one.